You can own 500 companies and still be making one giant bet. Not a bad bet, not a foolish bet, but a bigger, more concentrated bet than many beginner investors realize. Because when people hear S&P 500, they often picture 500 companies all sharing the work equally. 500 baskets, 500 safety nets, 500 little pieces spreading the risk around. But that is not how most S&P 500 index funds work. By the end of this video, you will know why the S&P 500 can be a strong investing tool and still be less diversified than the name sounds. More importantly, you will know how to ask the better question. Not, is the S&P 500 good or bad, but what job is it doing in my portfolio? Welcome to Grow with Tony, simple money lessons, for education only, not financial advice. Let me start with the part that gets lost online. This is not an anti-S&P 500 video. I am not here to tell you that an S&P 500 fund is a mistake, or that you should sell it, or that some complicated portfolio is automatically smarter. For many long-term investors, a low-cost S&P 500 index fund can be a simple and powerful core holding. The problem is not the fund. The problem is the story many beginners tell themselves about the fund. They say, I own 500 companies, so I am diversified. And that sentence is partly true, but incomplete in a very important way. Owning many companies is one layer of diversification, but it does not tell you how much of your money is actually riding on each company, each sector, or each type of market risk. Think of it like a classroom with 500 students. If every student gets one vote, then yes, the room is very spread out. One person cannot control the whole outcome. But if 10 students get more than 1/3 of the votes, and one group of students gets about 1/3 of the whole room's influence, then the classroom still has 500 people, but the power is not evenly shared. That is the part many new investors miss. The S&P 500 is not equal weighted by default. It is market cap weighted. More specifically, S&P Dow Jones Indices describes many of its equity indices as float-adjusted market capitalization weighted, which means a company's weight is tied to its publicly available market value. In plain English, bigger companies get bigger slices. If a company becomes enormous, the index gives it more influence. If another company is much smaller, it gets a much smaller slice. That structure has benefits. It is simple. It is rules-based. It naturally lets companies that grow larger become a bigger part of the index. You are not paying a manager to constantly guess which company should matter most. The market value decides the weight. But here is the trade-off. The same structure that makes the S&P 500 simple can also make it more concentrated when a few companies become very large. This is where the 500 companies headline starts to mislead people. If 500 companies were truly equal slices, each company would be about 0.2% of the portfolio. That would mean no single company would move the fund very much by itself. But in a real market cap-weighted S&P 500 ETF, the biggest companies can be several percent each, not 0.2%. Several percent. And those differences matter. For example, in a March 31st, 2026 fact sheet for a major S&P 500 ETF, the fund had 503 holdings, but the top 10 holdings made up 36.42% of the portfolio. In a State Street S&P 500 ETF fact sheet from the same date, the top 10 holdings added up to about 36.48%. Holdings change, so do not treat those numbers as permanent. But they make the lesson very clear. The top 10 companies were not a tiny side note. They were more than 1/3 of the fund. And the sector picture showed the same thing. Those March 31, 2026 fact sheets showed information technology at about 1/3 of the fund. Again, that does not mean technology is bad. It does not mean the S&P 500 is broken. It means the fund is not a perfectly balanced basket of 500 equal ideas. It has a shape. It has a center of gravity. And if you own it, you should know what that center of gravity is. This is where I think beginners get trapped, because the word diversified starts doing too much work. They hear, I own hundreds of stocks. Then they feel, I am protected from concentration. But those are not the same sentence. Investor education sites often describe diversification as spreading money among different investments to reduce risk. They also warn, correctly, that diversification cannot guarantee you avoid losses when markets drop. That second part matters. Diversification is not a force field. It is a way of not letting one thing decide everything. So the real question is, not only how many holdings do I have? The real question is, how much influence does each risk have? If your S&P 500 fund is a major part of your portfolio, then large U.S. companies have a major role in your money. If the largest names are a large part of that fund, then those companies have a major role too. If one sector becomes very heavy, then that sector's good years and bad years matter more to you than the word 500 inches might suggest. And this is not just an academic point. It changes how investors behave. When the biggest companies are doing well, the S&P 500 can feel amazing. The investor looks at the account and says, index investing works. But if the same group of giants has a rough period, the investor can suddenly feel confused. Wait, why is my diversified fund moving so much? The answer may be, because it was diversified, but not in the way you imagined. It owned many names, but the weights were not evenly spread. And once an investor sees that, the natural reaction is to fix it. That is where the video quietly changes from a lesson about one index fund into a lesson about portfolio building. Because the first risk is underestimating concentration. The second risk is trying to solve concentration by adding clutter. Now, the next mistake is very common. Someone realizes this and says, okay, I need more diversification. Then they buy another fund with a different ticker, another app screen, another line in the portfolio. And emotionally, that feels safer. You now have more funds. But more funds does not automatically mean more diversification. If you own one S&P 500 fund, and then you buy another S&P 500 fund that tracks the same index, you probably did not add a new job to the portfolio. You mostly added the same job with a different label. It is like buying 3 copies of the same umbrella and feeling prepared for snow boots, sunscreen, and a winter coat. More items, same function. Even when funds are not exactly the same, you still have to check what they actually hold and how they are weighted. A large cap U.S. fund, a total U.S. market fund, and a growth fund may all have different names. But if the biggest holdings overlap heavily, your portfolio may still be leaning on many of the same companies. Imagine 2 investors. One owns a single S&P 500 fund and understands exactly what it is. Large U.S. companies, market cap weighted, with the biggest names carrying the most influence. That investor may be simple, but the plan is honest. The other owns 5 funds and feels more advanced. But 3 of those funds lean heavily toward the same giant U.S. companies. One fund is a growth fund that doubles down on many of the same names, and the last fund was added because a video said it was safer without explaining why. On paper, the second investor owns more tickers. In real life, the second investor may not own more useful diversification. That is why this topic is not about making your portfolio look busy. It is about making your portfolio tell the truth. This is where I would slow down if I were sitting with a beginner investor. I would not ask, how many funds do you own? I would ask, what job does each fund do? Because if 2 funds do the same job, one of them may not be adding much diversification. It may only be adding complexity. And complexity can be dangerous in a quiet way. It makes the portfolio look more thoughtful than it really is. You see 5 tickers and feel like you built a system. But under the hood, you might have one main bet repeated 5 ways. Here is the main shift I want you to remember. Diversification is not the number of logos inside a fund. Diversification is how many different risks are actually allowed to move your money. That one sentence changes the whole conversation, because now you stop asking, do I own enough things? You start asking, are these things different enough to matter? Different enough by company weight, different enough by sector, different enough by country, different enough by asset class, different enough by how they behave when markets get ugly. And notice what this does not mean. It does not mean every investor needs a complicated portfolio. Sometimes simple is better. For a young long-term investor, a high stock allocation may make sense. For another person near retirement, the same allocation may feel too volatile. For someone with a short-term goal, Cash and bonds may matter more than squeezing every bit of stock exposure. Asset allocation depends on time horizon and risk tolerance. The point is not to copy someone else's mix. The point is to stop using the word diversified as a sleeping pill. If you own an S&P 500 fund, say what it is. It is large-cap U.S. stock exposure. That is a real job. A useful job? A powerful job. But it is not the same as owning every risk in the world in perfect balance. And once you say the job clearly, your decisions get cleaner. Here is a simple 3-line audit you can use. Line 1. I own this because... For an S&P 500 fund, your answer might be, I own this because I want broad exposure to large U.S. companies through a low-cost index fund. Good. That is clear. Line 2. The risk I accept is... Your answer might be, I accept that this fund is market cap weighted, so the largest companies and leading sectors can drive a lot of the result. Also good. Now you are not pretending the trade-off does not exist. Line 3. I would only add another fund if... This is the line that saves people from collecting tickers. I would only add another fund if it gives me a different job, not just the same exposure with a new name. That different job might be smaller companies. It might be international stocks. It might be bonds. It might be cash for a goal that cannot handle stock market swings. It might be nothing, because maybe your current plan is already simple and intentional enough. The answer depends on the person. But the audit is the same. Job, risk, reason to add. If you cannot finish those 3 sentences, you may not have a portfolio yet. You may have a shopping cart, and I say that gently, because this is all of us at some point. It is very easy to buy a fund because the internet keeps repeating a ticker. It is easy to add something because it sounds smart. It is easy to look at a clean app screen and feel like the plan is more organized than it is. I have felt that pull too. More lines can feel like more control. But investing often rewards the opposite. Fewer moving parts, clearer jobs, and more honesty about the risks you are actually taking. So what should you not do with this information? First, do not panic. Learning that the S&P 500 has concentration does not mean you discovered a secret disaster. It means you discovered the design of the tool. A hammer is not bad because it is bad at being a screwdriver. An S&P 500 fund is not bad because it is not a complete global multi-asset plan by itself. Second, do not chase the opposite extreme. Some investors hear cap-weighted and immediately think, then equal weight must be better. Maybe, maybe not. Equal weighting has its own trade-offs. International diversification has its own trade-offs. Bonds have their own trade-offs. Cash has its own trade-offs. Every solution solves one problem and introduces another. That is why the job question matters more than the product name. Third, do not confuse past performance with a permanent law of nature. If the largest companies have been strong, it is tempting to believe they will always carry the portfolio. If they have a weak stretch, it is tempting to believe the whole structure is broken. Both reactions can lead to bad decisions. The better move is to know what you own before the emotion shows up. Because when markets are calm, everyone believes they are long-term. When the biggest part of the portfolio starts falling, that is when the real plan gets tested. So here is Tony's simple rule for this topic. The S&P 500 can be a great core. But do not let the number 500 make you turn your brain off. Ask what is inside. Ask how it is weighted. Ask what job it does. Ask what risk you are accepting. And before you add another fund, ask whether it changes the portfolio or only changes the label. That is the difference between collecting investments and building a plan. One looks diversified on the screen. The other is diversified in behavior. And behavior is what matters when the market stops being friendly. If you remember only one thing, make it this. The S&P 500 is not automatically wrong, and it is not automatically enough. It is a tool. Use it like a tool. Know the job. Know the trade-off. Then build the rest of the plan around your actual life, not around a slogan. In the comments, tell me this. Is the S&P 500 your whole stock plan, your core holding, or just one piece? And if you want more lessons that turn fund names, market noise, and investing rules into plain English portfolio decisions, subscribe to Grow with Tony. Keep learning, Keep growing your wealth, and I will see you in the next lesson.